For anyone who's already signed on, we're just waiting on one more panelist to join us and then we'll be underway. So thanks very much for joining us today. Just to let you know you're in the right place. This is the Allyship and LGBTQ+ webinar discussing these issues in the workplace. So just waiting on
there he is.
Great.
That's all right, don't be silly, it's no problem at all. I'll just check on numbers. Right, that's everyone, isn't it? Quick count. Great. So let's kick off then, because I don't want to waste a minute, because we've got some fantastic panelists with us today, and just really want to, have as much time as possible for questions and so on. So our panelists today: Tony, Chikere, Julie, Greg, Jemma, and Dan. Elaine is showing as a panelist because she's my VA, and she's here to just back up, because I'm having some screen issues occasionally on Zoom. So just in case we need any backup with questions and so on. But I just want to, rather than me do long introductions, and I love your t-shirt, Dan, by the way. Love that. Just before I do long introductions, I'd rather not do that. Let's hear from everyone you're going to be hearing from today. So just going to go around quickly for everyone to do a really quick introduction. So Tony, can you kick off?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Tony McCaffery. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm the founder and managing director of Diversity Scotland, which is a leading diversity, equity and inclusion consultancy based in Scotland, as you might guess from the name. I've worked in the field of people and talent for around 27 years now, with the last few years focused specifically on ED&I. And as a queer and mixed race person of mixed ethnic heritage, with disabilities, these intersectional aspects very much influence the work that I do on a day-to-day basis. Fantastic, thank you. Chikere, would you like to go next?
Yeah, definitely. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me, Nikki. My name is Chikere Igbokwe. I'm based in London, and I'm the founder of Inclucive, which is a D&I consultancy, and also Allyship, which is a community for allies. My background is in recruitment. I'm very, very passionate about diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And I'm really, really pleased to be on this panel today to talk about allyship and LGBT and equality. So thank you very much for having me.
Lovely, thank you. And Jem, do you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Jemma. I'm from JLL. I'm a senior director working on an FCMG account. I'm actually also a committee board member for the JLL ID network, so inclusion and diversity, but we feel that identity is at the core of any type of diversity, belonging, and also inclusion. So I'm here to help host and also talk alongside with Dan, which nice introduction there.
Fantastic. Dan, let's do you next then, since Jemma just gave you a shout out.
Hi everyone, Daniel Hawkins. So I'm a senior director at JLL. I look after a client account. Very famous social media platform is my client. I'm also the interim co-head of JLL's Pride Network, and I also sit on the steering committee for LGBT and FM. So I help them run their events. So yes, very much looking forward to talking about today. Nikki, am I going to do my bit after everybody else, or about allyship, or should I do that now?
Yeah, we're going to kick off. Yeah, just introduce Greg and Julie, and then we'll kick off with you and Jem. That's awesome, thank you. Greg, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. My name's Greg Turner-Smart. My background is mechanical engineering. I joined Rolls-Royce in 2006, and in 2015 I was part of the team that launched the LGBT+ network in Rolls-Royce in the UK, and I've been chairing that network ever since. And largely on the back of the success that we've had with that network, I was moved into the role of Group Inclusion and Diversity Lead for global Rolls-Royce D&I activities at the end of last year.
Brilliant, thanks Greg. And Julie, last but definitely not least.
Hi everyone, my name is Julie Musesoglu. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the Senior Diversity and Inclusion Manager at Homes England. I also co-founded Homes England's LGBTQ network back in 2014, and in 2008 we co-founded an external network called LGBT Property Professionals.
Brilliant, that's everyone, that's great, thanks so much. So Dan, over to you.
Thank you. So I messaged Nikki and Jemma earlier this morning asking if I could start by making sure that I practice what I preach. and I walked the walk, and I couldn't start today's session without talking about the last 7 days. So as a man who grew up in a female household, 3 sisters and my mum, I've always tried to put myself in the shoes of any other diverse group. And I thought I kind of got what the challenges for women were, but this week has just really made me realize I had no idea. And if we think about just a bit this storyboard here, you know, Meghan the Duchess of Sussex, the news around her, down to Sarah Everard, Laverne Cox, Breonna Taylor, it's the first anniversary on the 13th of March, through to the picture there of Patsy Stevenson. I just don't know what to say. And we just are not putting ourselves in the shoes of other people enough generally. And when I think about allyship, and Maya Angelou here, I couldn't say it any better myself. She says, you know, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, you do better. And I just wanted to pull out a couple of excerpts from her poem, I'll Rise. And I'm just going to read these out to you and just share the words. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. And we need to help each other rise up. We can't do this on our own. We have to walk alongside other groups that are suffering. That's what it means to be an ally. You have to stand shoulder to shoulder with those other groups that are being persecuted, that are being criminalized day to day. And just this last 7 days, if it doesn't teach us what we need to do to support each other, and the LGBT community needs to stand up and support women, because although we've got our problems, so have they, and we need to help each other. So I just wanted to take a moment, because I couldn't talk about allyship today without walking the walk and talking the talk. So thank you, Nikki and Jemma, for sort of just giving me that opportunity to start with that.
Oh, thank you for sharing it. It's really important. I think that what a powerful way to start our session today. So thanks so much for that. Dan and Jemma, I know
and
that
sorry, just to say, whilst we're on this call, by the way, 6 women globally will be murdered by somebody that they know in an act of violence, just whilst we're on this call. So that's something just to remember as well.
It's really powerful, and that's why we're having this debate today around allyship and what we can all do to be better allies and how we can move things forward. So thanks so much, Dan, for sharing that. It's really important. Jemma and Dan, can you chat about, can you kick us off with allyship and what it means in your organisation and the journey that you two have been on?
Well, some people may not know, but I actually only met Dan last year as we went to our board of directors to discuss our own personal human stories, just our experiences, you know, how we've grown up, how people have affected us through their speech or potentially through their own ignorances about, you know, culturally for me, race, and then obviously with Dan from an LGBT perspective. What was really quite astonishing between the two of us, you know, very similar backgrounds, you know, grew up in London, you know, single parent families, you know, we've really kind of given back and really proud to be brought up by a single mum, and watch them kind of really strive to be the best that they can be. But one of the biggest things that we kind of realized that crossed over was how we regulate our behaviors. So from my perspective as a Black woman, you know, making sure I don't come off as aggressive or angry, really kind to make sure that I fit into a persona of a working Black person, you know, very open, very, you know, juvenile, making sure that people can't see me as anything more than just a normal colleague. And in doing so, it means that actually you turn up to work in a completely different persona. You aren't yourself. You're actually going and pretending to be somebody, which then means that you're more on a heightened alert about anything that's then going on around you. And then you start having this internal dialogue with yourself about whether or not you're worthy or not in being in the positions that you are in, because actually you're not bringing yourself 100% to work. And then the other thing that we were discussing is, you know, with Dan and anybody from the LGBT community, you can very much hide your sexuality if you want to, but being Black and maybe me visiting Poland or Russia is not necessarily a high priority for me, because I can't, you know, change the colour of my skin. So any type of preconceived ideas or potentially cultures around what somebody from a Central European country may think of somebody who's Black, I can't change that. But then also as well, I could not feel safe in going and visiting these countries. And that's how obviously me and Dan kind of linked in together. But Dan can tell you lots of things that go on in those countries as well on behalf of his community.
So we realised the power of amplifying our messages together. And if you remember last summer, everybody was moaning because they couldn't go on holiday. And me and Jemma were saying, well, you know what, going on holiday is a real privilege. And there are parts of the world where we just can't go. And would a straight white person ever have to think about straight related crime, researching that before they go on holiday, or race related crime before they go on holiday? No. Or being able to hold the hand of the person that you love when you go on holiday. And it's just helping put people in your shoes and why it's important to help fight that battle. And Jemma and me, we presented to the EMEA board. And one of the stats that I quoted to them, and I made sure I got the latest ones today, is that in 71 countries currently, I'm illegal. I could be arrested. By the way, almost half of those are Commonwealth countries. 43 countries, lesbians could be jailed, it's criminalized. But for men, there are 11 countries where I could be murdered for who I am, something I can't control. But what that number 11 doesn't tell you is the countries that are currently rolling back rights as we speak, under our noses. Poland, over 30% of Poland has currently been declared an LGBT-free zone. Local districts are declaring themselves LGBT-free. And the government recently got in on a re-election. It's a Roman Catholic country that actually I love. I lived there, I had a flat there for a period. It's the most beautiful country, but the government is driving this right-wing agenda. Even the Catholic Church thinks that the Polish Church is right-wing. I mean, you know, anyway. And there are 15 countries where gender expression is currently illegal. And if I was to bring up a map, it's all predominantly in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, which is why us in this region here, where we're doing business, where we are engaging with corporates, organizations, it's important to put this at the top of the agenda. But the most important thing, and this is what me and Jemma were talking about, is creating a safe space. When you're in the four walls of the office, be who you want to be and bring your whole self to work. And regulated behavior as leaders, it's not just about me regulating my behavior. As a leader within our organization, I have to look out for who else is doing that. I have to look for those opportunities where somebody may be holding something back. And as a leader and as an ally, that's my opportunity to virtually put my arm around them and say, hey, I saw that maybe you were uncomfortable there, or you were regulating your behavior. Help me understand what that was so I can make sure you don't feel you need to do that moving forward. That's what it means to be an ally, just on a day-to-day basis. I'm not talking about having to get out and go marching. I would love it if you would do that. But just day-to-day, look out for that regulated behavior because it's happening. And I bet if I asked you to just stop, take 60 seconds and think about people you've worked with your entire career, have you ever seen somebody regulating their behavior? And you'll come across two types of people that cause people to regulate their behavior. People who are prejudiced. Okay, I don't particularly have much time for those people. And an example of where I've had prejudice is I worked with somebody who wouldn't shake my hand in the workplace. But I was never going to let him own that. So I remember standing in the doorway of a meeting room and forcing him to shake my hand before he left. And then I've had, you've got ignorance at the other end. Ignorance I can work with. That's an opportunity. I love that, because people put a foot wrong, and you've got to create a safe space for people to put the foot wrong so that you can help them. And I've got two examples. So in the workplace, I once said to somebody, "Oh my goodness, you look really well. How have you lost weight?" And he said, "Oh, I've been on the AIDS diet." So, and you can just imagine, right? And he didn't think anything of it. And it took me about an hour to reconcile what I'd heard. And then I had to get another client to go back to him and say, that wasn't right. And he was devastated that he had upset me. Different generation, that was a joke in the 80s. But he still brought that into the workplace in 2018. And then one other situation, somebody said to me, "So if you were normal, what would you think about this?" It's like, sorry, what? But it was an opportunity to educate. And I was able to, use that example with that individual multiple times, because we took the power out of it and put the power into it to educate. So, but there are multiple positive experiences, and maybe Jemma, I'll sort of hand back to you about some of the positive ally experiences that you've had, because those are also important to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I will just say off the back of what you're saying, we talk about a safe space, but we also need to think about calling in than necessarily calling out. Bringing people in and actually enabling them to have that discussion in the first place. I think it's really easy for us to kind of wag the finger and be, high and mighty on something, than necessarily taking that step back and trying to see that person's perception and where they get that ideology from. And, is that one of their cores, or is it just something that they've heard and they've just made up their opinion in that way? So I think it's really important to kind of use that kind of language. That's perfect, mate. Sorry, that was my son calling me. He was calling me in. So I think it's a really great way to kind of get people to start talking, and that it's not that uncomfortable position anybody is in when you're calling in, because it is open. From my perspective, just with regards to positive experiences, my interview with JLL was blind. It was a conversation on the phone. It was down to my personal experience, as well as how I answered the questions, me being very, very honest and open. And I was due to have a second interview, which would have been a face-to-face, but they were like, "No, just get her in. She's perfect for the job." So for me, that was great. And stepping onto that 6th floor on Bank Street, it was such a nice feeling. Everybody was very open. We have a very multicultural group of people that work at Bank Street, and it was fantastic. And I really did feel a part of the team. I, just like Dan, I've had those experiences where most people will hear my voice through, virtual on a call. They then meet me and then, "Oh, I thought you was white." And I suppose if you were to check LinkedIn, 99% of those ladies called Jemma Williams are white. But I am black. It has, a couple of times it's gone as far as them then explaining, what colour hair I had and what eye colour I was. So, I have had that negativity as well. But I would definitely say to you, for my personal experience, especially within the environment of JLL, I've really grown to become my own self and to really have a space to be vulnerable, whether that's with my manager or with my teammates, and to be accepted. We've got all these other things that are going on in life, but just having that moment, feeling safe enough to be vulnerable was great. And for me, it came from our leader, Mccarthy, when he placed out his video after the death of George Floyd, or the killing actually of George Floyd. And for me, that really made me cement my idea in being kind of a champion of inclusion and diversity for JLL, because they got it, they understood it. And for somebody like that, who's a leader, to stand up and be counted, right behind you at that. So, yeah.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much for sharing.
Sorry, Dan, go
on.
I say, but they know that they still need to do more. We're not doing
definitely.
We are not doing enough.
No.
Like some of our targets, I'm like, I'm sorry, still not good enough. But actually they're expecting us to push them. We have to be that voice for
exactly.
all
And that's what I like about our ID network and the board for that. It's coming from the ground. We are pushing our board to be responsible and to be accountable for what's going on in the workplace. And again, it's giving that power back into us, the people that are the subject matter experts in this everyday life that we're leading, and for them to take those actions upon and then actually translate it into our everyday focus and brand value. So for me, again, that kind of being open as a business is absolutely fantastic. And we do have these other great groups, as Dan was saying. We've got a new Women in Business Network, it's Women History Month this month. And we've got our LGBT communities as well, and other communities and networks that are out there, single parents and also the Working Parents Network, etc. So there's lots that we're doing to really ensure that our vision does include everybody, including that intersectionality part as well at the same time.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much for sharing that. I think from what you're talking about, that leads us quite nicely into what Greg and Julie are going to talk about today, about the different employee groups and so on, and the importance of employee resource groups. So shall I hand over to you guys? I don't know if one of you wants to go first. I think Julie, you wanted to talk about the power of data and how you can use data to explain the need for an employee resource group and how you can bring those about. So shall I hand over to you, Julie?
Yeah. So I set up, as I mentioned, Homes England's LGBTQ network back in 2014, and the reason why I did that, so I wasn't the diversity inclusion manager then. I was in quite a junior position in the organisation actually, but diversity inclusion wasn't something that was talked about at all really in the organisation. So I'd set up a small network within the Northwest offices where I was based to just get the conversation started. And as part of that, we looked at our people survey by protected characteristics. I was quite the experience of LGBT people within the organisation was much less than other communities, not just non-LGBT people, but other protected characteristics. So I wanted to find out why that was really. So I didn't know a single other person that was LGBT. It wasn't something that we really talked about at work, but I was really interested in why was this the case and what can we do about it to make it better. So another thing was actually looking at our diversity data, and the number of people that had put prefer not to say was so much higher on the sexual orientation question than it was for any other characteristic. And again, it made me think something's not quite right here. So the data is something that really drove sort of the network into action. So the network was set up on the back of that, and just to get people talking and to understand, first of all, find our community within the organisation, and then understand what the challenges really were. So yeah, I'm a big fan of using data to drive actions, but then also use the voices of the people within your organisation to really get to the bottom of what some of the challenges are. And on the back of actually setting up the network the following year within the people's survey results, the LGBT colleagues, their experiences was the best out of all the protected characteristics. So again, the data and having that data, collecting that data is so useful to not only getting things started and getting that business case to do things, but also to measure the work that you're doing and what impact it's making. And it's had a huge impact over the years. We saw our Allies network get set up a couple of years later. It's recently just merged, so we've got one bigger joined up network now. And we've seen people who've been in the closet for years, who at the organisation, who felt that they're able to come out. And yeah, just some real tangible benefits to individuals, but also to the organisation as a whole.
And how do you encourage inclusivity amongst these ERGs? I mean, I know that it's important that you've got the inclusivity with allies and so on. So how do you do that within the organisation, or how have you done that? Yeah,
so I think it's very easy. But we were a very... Oh, sorry, my dog's going off in the background. So yeah, we were quite a small network to start off with, and actually every single network member was either gay or lesbian, and that definitely presents some challenges and traps that you can easily fall into as a network group. So it's very easy to forget about the B and the T in LGBT and any other identities as well. So what we've done now is, because we still have some of the same challenges, we've got very, very few members that are trans or bi. So we make sure that within our network group, we've now got a sort of set structure in place with some clear roles and responsibilities from members, and some of the roles within that are a bi rep to make sure that, you know, we're not forgetting about bi people, and we've got a trans rep as well. So when people come forward that want to take that role that do identify as bi or trans, then the current reps will step aside. But I think it's really important to just remember that actually there's people out there that might not be ready to, you know, come out and join the network and take that active role yet, but you still need to remember them. We've also got people that are sort of got to focus on intersectionality and making sure that we're collaborating with the other networks as well to make sure that everyone's voice is heard and everyone's represented.
Brilliant. Tony, do you just want to talk about intersectionality and how it impacts on ERGs and so on? Is that something that you can comment on?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's great to hear Julie's explanation there of the work that you've been doing, and the fact that you've got a focus across all of the communities within the LGBTQ plus umbrella is fantastic. Also, the fact that you mentioned the connection there with other resource groups across the organisation, and I think that's key, because, you know, when it comes to intersectionality, particularly for LGBTQ plus people, there are some very specific barriers that are unique, as all intersectional barriers are, but some of those are perhaps the most damaging that we see. You know, that conflict between faith, religious faith, and gender identity or sexual orientation is something that's not always immediately recognised. That conflict between ethnic heritage and LGBTQ plus identities is also something that can pose so many barriers. And for me as well, you know, as well as being a queer person and a person of colour, as I mentioned, I also have disabilities. And that lack of access and inclusion and equality for people with disabilities, particularly in LGBTQ plus spaces, never mind in workplaces, is something that can really add to a sense of exclusion that is very unique. So if you're already facing a barrier of, you know, not being able to connect with other people who are like you or be able to take part in that community, actually when you add disability and you layer that on as well, there are some quite physical barriers that can stop you. There was a scenario that happened in Scotland a couple of years ago that you may have seen in the press, because I know it went international, about a couple who had come back from an awards ceremony where one of them had actually been awarded an LGBTQ plus inclusion award in recognition of some of the work that they'd been doing on intersectionality in Scotland, and went to the biggest LGBT club and bar complex in Glasgow, and was refused entry because they weren't able to walk unaided themselves up the 2 steps into the venue. So the gentleman got down on his hands and knees and crawled into the venue before being manhandled by the bouncers. And I think, you know, there's someone who really wanted to celebrate with his community an award that he received for supporting his community with a particular focus on disability and LGBTQ intersectionality, and the community venues that were there to support him couldn't make it accessible. So a facilities management consideration there, and couldn't make it accessible from an inclusion perspective either. So we need to think about how all of these things connect and intersect to create not just multiple barriers, but real intersecting barriers that are so unique that you're not looking at each barrier as 1 + 1 + 1, let's solve each of these barriers individually, but how do you resolve those barriers as a completely new, unique challenge?
That's really powerful, thank you. And Greg, do you want to tell us a little bit about your story and your journey within setting up ERG within Rolls-Royce?
Yeah, absolutely. So we launched our network in 2015, and initially there was a bit of a struggle. It took about a year of one or two people talking with HR to try and get something established. But what I decided on quite early was that we would take a professional approach to our ERG, and that we would tackle creating a network as we would tackle any project or as we would manage any other team within the business. As it's important to acknowledge every business is different, every business is unique. So you have to set up something that will work for you, will work for your employees. Are you global or just localized? How many employees you have? They're all factors that can impact it. But for us, it was a professional approach. We had our initial group of volunteers, and we used that to define what is the purpose of this group? What are we trying to achieve? And actually working with allies is a key element of that. Education, how can people be an ally to our community? Raising awareness of the issues that our community faces. So thinking about what is the purpose of this group? What are we trying to achieve? And then to do that, based on the volunteers we had at the time, well, what can we create? What positions in this team can we create? And what are our priorities within the team? And I was fortunate enough to become chair. And part of that was really to just set that strategy. As you would do with any project, with any team, what is our strategy? What are we trying to achieve? How will we achieve it? And we then grew the team, and each person on the team had a defined role, and each role had a description of what their purpose was on the team and what they individually were trying to achieve. So that really helped, I think, with the understanding from everybody on the team. What are they trying to achieve? What is their purpose? What are they there for? We brought in a sponsor, and it's really important to have a sponsor because they can unlock the challenges, get you across those barriers that you might face. And you need to have somebody who has influence within the business. I'd also say, and it's not maybe critical, but if you can have someone who passionately believes in your cause as your sponsor, it makes a huge difference. And the sponsor, one of the co-sponsors we have for our LGBT network, he's a straight ally, but he has two sisters who are both lesbians. And that gives him the real passion to want to be involved. It's not a tick box exercise for him. He really wants to see us make a difference. So having those objectives, the roles defined, having that structure, and then underpinning it with the governance that's needed. We have regular meetings. Everybody who joins our committee, they know between 3 and 5 on the first Wednesday every month, you will be free to attend to our committee meetings, to come along and learn about what we're doing next. And the other thing as well, and we've really embedded this throughout everything we've done from the very beginning, is that everything that we do as a network is open to everybody in the business. So we really, really want to encourage allies or people who are just looking to learn to come to our events. So with the exception of a trans safe space and a bi safe space, which are exclusive to those groups, every event we do is open to absolutely everybody in the business. We want them to come along, learn and grow and develop to be better allies to support our network.
David brings up an interesting question. Thanks, David, for posing that. And I think it's an interesting thing that we can perhaps have a chat about. He says, is there a case where there can be too many allies and the network actually becomes diluted, or it ends up changing its focus? I wondered what your thoughts are on that.
I think there is a risk of that, but I think you mentioned the key word there, keeping your focus. So I think it's really important to have that core team who understand the purpose and the objectives and help you keep that focus. Our network in Rolls-Royce, we have around about 1,000 members of our LGBT network, and probably about 85% of those are allies. So it is predominantly allies in our network, but it's led by LGBT plus employees. The main focus is around supporting our LGBT plus employees, but bringing the allies on board to come on that journey with us. So I don't think you can have too many, but I think you can easily lose the focus. So that is absolutely something that you have to keep in mind.
Dan, did you have a comment you wanted to make on that?
I think, having a strong business plan each year, to drive your agenda, have as many allies as you can possibly get your hands on, right? And when I was working with Macquarie Bank, who was my client, and I had the privilege to sit on their Pride Steering Committee, in fact, I think one of the heads on this call, the allies became competitive. And what we did was we incentivized ally visibility with different gifts and different tokens. And so the more visible an ally you are, and actually the more you contributed, the more you would be recognized and rewarded for it. And I think the pinnacle was this iPhone case that said that you were an ally, that everybody was fighting to get to that level. So I think having a really clear business case will set and keep your North Star where it needs to be. But getting your allies and getting them to be visible and amplifying your message, there's that word that I used earlier today, amplify the message and amplify that plan. There's got to be room for everybody, and the more the merrier.
Julie, did you have anything you
wanted to add? Can I just add to that?
Of course.
Sorry, can I just add to that? I totally agree. And I think what's really important is, we all need to know what an ally is and what an ally does. And I think the danger is that performative allyship, okay? Doing something for show personship, for showmanship, for showwomanship. And I think, for me, that is the danger. So I think if we all understand what an ally is and what an ally does, I think, we definitely can't have too many allies. So if we look at, an ally has to educate themselves. It's up to you as an ally to actually put in the work. And I always say this to people, and people look at me like I'm actually crazy. But an ally has to put in the work. It's up to you to, go ahead and educate yourself, not for me to do that, and allies have got to listen, listen to our voices. We are the minority, so listen to what we've got to say. It really, really is important, and have conversations, So I would definitely say we can't have too many allies. I think we need more allies, but we need more active allies versus performative allies. And that's just what I wanted to say.
That's brilliant. Thank you. I know that you also wanted to...
Sorry, I was just going to say more active allies, more advocates as well, really. People who are really advocating.
Yeah. I agree.
Sorry, back to you, Chikere. In terms of, I know you wanted to talk to us a little bit more around allyship and what it means to be an ally and so on. So can I hand over to you now, and you can tell us a little bit about your point of view and the work that you do around creating allies within organisations? Yeah,
definitely. I'll just rewind back just to tell you a bit more about me and my career. So I'm very proud to be British born to a Nigerian father and a West Indian mother. My mother's from Trinidad and Tobago. I was born in Southampton. So, I guess in terms of me growing up, I, was always the only one. I was always the only Black person at school in Southampton back in the 80s. That was not unusual. And I think for me, coming to London, I came to London to go to university, and it was amazing, to see lots of representation, to see other people who actually looked like me and people who didn't look like me. It was just absolutely phenomenal. And after university, I sort of fell into recruitment like many people do, and really, really loved it. And I always found it quite strange that, I was working in such a diverse market. I was working the London market, such a diverse talent pool, ready-made diverse talent pool, but still, diversity and inclusion was, I guess, not always on everyone's list. I think, I've worked with lots of organisations who really, for them, D&I was really a tick box exercise. And I find, for me, 2020 was a year when everybody woke up, including myself. Okay, we all woke up because I see myself as a recruiter. Recruiters, we have such a powerful role in diversifying an organisation. Fantastic role, but not all recruiters can actually do that. And I think for me, last year was really, really traumatic because obviously we were in the midst, and still are, in the midst of this crazy pandemic. And I was binge listening to the news and freaking out about, things that were happening. And then we saw the awful murder of George Floyd, okay? And that really got me thinking. And then, amazingly, I saw the Black Lives Matter protest, and I saw everybody coming together. And what I actually say to people, if we look at the Black Lives Matter protest that happened last year, it's not black versus white, it's everybody coming together to actually fight the injustices, okay? And I'm quite lucky because I've always had quite a diverse connections and diverse pool of friends. I'm really, really lucky. So for me, I've always been, diversity was, part of my life. But unfortunately, for lots of people, they, even though they live in London, which is quite a diverse city, they still probably don't have a gay friend. They probably still don't have a black friend, They still probably don't have a brown friend. They still probably don't have friends who are disabled. So for me, I needed to take action. I needed to do something. And also I have lots of my connections actually reaching out to me saying, Chikere, what can we do? You know, how can I help you? You know, so for me, I set up Allyship, which is a community of allies, okay, to come together and talk about the injustices that we go through, that minority people go through. So not just colour, not just race, sexual identity, disability. I set that up. And it really, really grew from there. And as I said before, you know, education is the key part of being an ally. I had people asking me about things, and I believe that self-education is important. And off the back of Allyship, the community, I actually set up the Allyship Book Club, which I know, Nikki, you are, you know, a valued member of.
I'm a big fan, yes.
Yeah, I set that up, and mainly because so that we can come together, we can read. And I'm really proud that the last book we read was in February. It was part of LGBTQ plus History Month, and we read Guapa. I don't know if any of you have actually read this book by Salim Haddad, and it talks about a gay man growing up in the Middle East and how difficult it is. And really proud that we had him as a speaker as well. But for me, I actually go into organisations and have those difficult discussions. I'm a true believer of creating a safe space where we can all come out and have an honest and open conversation. Because as you can imagine, talking about things such as race or LGBT, there's difficult conversations to have for lots of people. You know, very few people will look at me and describe me as a black woman. You know, they will say everything else, but they will call me black. And Jemma, unlike you, my name is very, very different. You know, so immediately people know I'm different. You know, immediately they know, oh, she's different. You know, she's probably not white. You know, so I don't tend to have that problem at all. You know, but I think for me, the problems I do have is, you know, people, you know, maybe not talking to me because they can't pronounce my name. Nobody would say, you know, how do I pronounce your name? It's just things like that. In the past, somebody has said to me, I'm not going to call you that. I'm going to call you Christy instead. So I do get those microaggressions. And also, not too long ago, I'm not going to say the date because that will make everybody know where I work. But not too long ago, you know, I was in a conversation. Well, I was listening to a conversation, and amongst other colleagues, and they were talking to a gentleman who'd just come back from Icky and saying how amazing he looked. He looked really tanned, and he said, "Oh, I'm not tanned. I'm just dirty. I haven't had a shower." And in terms of allyship, nobody said anything. But guess what? I didn't say anything either. I felt so embarrassed, you know. So for me, I think it really is important to equip people with the tools to actually have these conversations, you know. So as I said, it's all about learning. Let's educate ourselves, you know, because allyship is a lifelong journey. There's no end, you know. And as allies, you will have difficult conversations. You really will. You will have difficult conversations and you will make mistakes. But do you know something? You just pick yourself up and you dust yourself off and you carry on. And unfortunately, you know, I think for me, it really is important for us to come together in such a group and have these conversations. Because now my two little cute sons who were cute many, many years ago are now teenage boys, and they're black teenage boys. And as you can imagine, I live in London, you know, and I remember writing a blog post not too recently about them, and it was entitled, "When Will My Sons Go From Cute to Threat?" And I have actually, you know, I have conversations with them all the time. You know, don't go out with your hood on. If you go into a shop, you know, don't have your hands in your pocket. Make sure you have your receipts. Because unfortunately, you know, because of the colour of their skin, they're treated differently. So I think for me, allyship is really, you know, we can't have too many allies. We need to keep having this conversation. We need to keep educating ourselves, and we need to keep speaking to other people, you know. So that's what I really want to say about what I do in allyship.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing. Phoebe's asked a question, which I think is really important, and I'd really like to cover this. What do you do, or how do you call out offensive behaviour without speaking for the person? So she's asked, what if the person wouldn't like you to call it out publicly as it happens, but rather leave it or speak to the offensive person privately? What do you do if you hear somebody being offensive? What, you know, we're talking about in a work environment here, because, you know, this is obviously relating to the workspace. I think it may be slightly different if you're in a social situation, but I know Tony's keen to answer this one. So what do you do, Tony? What do you do in this situation?
Thanks. I think it goes back to something that Jemma said earlier on, which is about calling in versus calling out. You know, the calling out version would be, you know, whoa, no, stop, that's really offensive. You know, whereas the calling in version would be, you know, I'm curious, what was your intention when you said that? Or, you know, how might someone else see this differently? Is it possible that someone might misinterpret your words or your actions? So it's about the approach that you take to it, because I think that you've raised a really great question there, Phoebe, in terms of, you know, not magnifying the level of discomfort that's there. So rather than calling it out, I would call it in.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to say on that? Because I think that's a really pertinent point.
Yeah, I always find as well, I think sometimes it really is difficult when you're in the workplace to actually, you know, call someone, you know, when you hear a microaggression, or when you hear something, to actually, you know, at that moment to say something. And sometimes, you know, something you can actually, you know, what I have found quite easy is, you know, speak to them, you know, afterwards, call them aside and actually speak to them, because more than likely they may not know that they have said something that is quite, you know, rude, that is inappropriate. So maybe, you know, say something to them, because also, you know, you're in a meeting and somebody says something, so how do little old you just stand up in that meeting and call that person out? You know, it's difficult, because even I can't do that. And as I said to you before, you know, when the gentleman was talking about, you know, this is, you know, I'm dirty kind of thing, I didn't say anything. I was there, I should have said something, but then again, no, nor did anyone else. You know, so it can be quite a tricky thing. But maybe, you know, speak to them afterwards and just say what you've just said is inappropriate, and just tell them why you think that. You know, that really does.
I will say this just from personal experience, because I've had this where I've been, well, I didn't realise at the time, but when we had somebody else come onto our account, Stephanie, and she was also of colour, and there was a confusion about who was going to be named Jemma and who was going to be named Stephanie. And it happened on several occasions that, you know, people started to laugh around the room as if it was a joke. And, you know, I just stood up and said, hi, I'm Jemma. This is what I do for my job. This is what I've been doing for you. And then introduced, obviously, the other person. So at that point, it was done. I do think it's how comfortable you feel within yourself to be able to take that lead. It was a senior person, but for me, it was, you can have a laugh in some respects, but then I flip it and say, if I was white and I called my colleague the wrong name, would that not be seen as me being incompetent? So why is it then okay for somebody else to be able to do it? So it's kind of trying to find that balance in the best possible way. So yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Jemma. I've got a question from Christina. She asked, how do you keep momentum up with ERGs, particularly in large international companies? So perhaps Greg and perhaps Dan and Jemma, you might be best placed to answer this one. What are the challenges, and what are your top tips for keeping up momentum? Greg, do you want to give that one a go first?
Yeah, I can. A few things from me, really. I think obviously you've got to keep it fresh. You've got to keep it inspiring. You need to use the full makeup of your membership as well. So if it's an LGBT plus network, you know, do events for the L, the G, the B, the T, and the plus. Really mix it up and keep it fresh. There's lots of different topics within the community that you can cover. So there's no end of things to do in that sense. We've talked about intersectionality collaboration. You know, bring more people together. That will increase your audiences, and also intersectional stories. They can be a lot more powerful and a lot more interesting, really, really unique, really different. The education piece is really important. Always keep trying to educate people. I think if people come to your events and leave feeling that they've learned something, then I think they'll come back for more. If you come away from an event and think, I got nothing from that, then you're probably not going to go back. Make it business relevant is another important one for us. So engage with your customers, your clients, your suppliers. Demonstrate to your employees why it's important, not just to your company, but to the others that you're working with. And then that will demonstrate the business impact, the business importance. And I think the last one for me will be celebrate your success. So we mustn't forget, when we do something good and we achieve something, shout about it. And people want to be associated with things that are successful. So if you've done something well and you've won that trophy, or one of your members has done something fantastic, shout about it, really celebrate that success, and that will encourage more people to want to come and get on board.
Brilliant, thank you. Dan, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Actually, the impact of cross-border storytelling has actually increased engagement, and has been a great source of education for me. And so it's just finding those people across those borders and in different territories, different jurisdictions, that will talk about those human-led stories, that actually for me has helped maintain engagement, especially in the last year where we're getting technological exhaustion. Just getting people to tell their stories from a different perspective, again amplifying that message, actually has increased engagement and brought more people into the audience. So I would embrace that and actually explore that more.
Brilliant, thank you. David mentions about Stonewall, Stonewall allies and trans allies training as well, worth exploring. I know that Julie, you mentioned Stonewall when you were talking about formulating your approach and using it to support other internal ERGs. Do you want to just talk a little bit about the Stonewall approach?
Yeah, so we've been entering the Stonewall Index for some years now, since about 2013, 2014-ish, I think. Historically done, and I saw a message, a question in the chat as well, which this is relative to. It's really helped us measure the success of what we're doing. So historically, we've in all honesty always done quite poor. However, like the last index submission, we saw a massive improvement where we jumped from 225th to 72nd in the index of the year, and became a top trans employer as well. And it's a really, really good way of measuring what you're doing, but it also adds a really clear guideline and, shows the areas that you should be focusing on. And some of that is the responsibility of the network of the ERG, and some of it's the wider organisation or allies' responsibility as well. But it's really helped shape some of the work that our network's done first of all, but then we've taken that and broadened it out to so our diversity and inclusion objectives at Homes England are loosely based on those categories, but instead of just focusing on LGBTQ, we're looking at it from the angles of other characteristics and that intersectional angle as well. The allies training are absolutely brilliant. So we've held several of the LGBT or trans allies training at Homes England. They've gone down really, really well. And we're really sort of seeing an impact. People's understanding of the feedback that we've got from people that have attended as well has just been absolutely phenomenal. So many people sort of doing things like including their pronouns on their email signatures after attending the trans ally training. So yeah, I think the training I'd definitely recommend for anyone something on LGBT. But it just seems like the Stonewall Index helping shaping and driving what we're doing has been a contributor to our success.
I think from a facilities management point of view, I think I'm right in saying that there aren't any FM companies on the Stonewall 100. And I was talking to somebody the other day saying, who's going to be the first? So go on, Dan. I'm coming to you as well, Tony. I know you've raised your hand too.
JLL are in the top 100.
Oh, you are top 100. Sorry.
Yeah.
Someone said to me the other day there wasn't any FM in there. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll have to have a look. So, that's good. Well done, JLL. Who's going to be next? Sorry, Tony, you had something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the fantastic answers from Greg and Daniel and Julie there, with particular focus around that international piece for employee resource groups. And I think that if your organisation is to succeed in I guess LGBT plus inclusion internationally, particularly where in countries where people are at high risk or as Daniel, risk of death, then you need to be sure about what model you want to adopt. So whether that's the when in Rome model or the embassy model or the advocate model for ERGs. And if you don't know about them, then there's lots of information online. In fact, I think Stonewall also provides some basic guidance around those three different models. But it's important that you get that model right, so that you are, I guess, sensitive to the cultural nuances of the country that you're operating in, whilst also being clear about what your position is as an organisation when it comes to LGBTQ plus inclusion.
Brilliant, thank you. Other than the numbers of attendees within your ERGs, how do you measure the effectiveness of these networks? Who wants to go first?
I think from our point of view, our Stonewall ranking is one of them, definitely. The uptake and you can just tell, I think, by the level of contribution in events that we put on, the sort of feedback from our engagement survey and how engaged people are. But I think But one real thing from me is it's partly just listening to people and hearing their experiences. And I've been at Homes England for 9 years now, and it's a massive change to 9 years ago. And I mentioned before, but having fresh people coming in and being open and being themselves is absolutely brilliant. Having people that have worked at the organisation for 9, 10 years and have never been out, and now feeling comfortable to be able to come out, which can be a very, very difficult thing to do, because there's that fear of people thinking that you've lied to them, and yeah, I think it's slightly different to being out from day one. So I think that's something that has made me incredibly sort of proud and emotional, to see that we can, the power of the network and the power of the allies that we've got. We always make sure our allies are visible allies as well, which is so important. Has actually made somebody feel comfortable to take that step and be able to be themselves after 10 years of not being able to do that.
Great. Does anyone else have anything that they'd like to add in terms of how do you measure effectiveness?
For us, we use the Gallup Q12 staff survey each year, and part of that is it generates an inclusion index and an engagement score. So we use that to track progress against inclusion. It's difficult because that's not specific for our LGBT network, but if you've got the right tools in place in terms of the data that your organisation collects, you can then slice that up by different diversity strands and look at how engaged and included your different groups of people feel within the business. So as a more formal tool, that works quite well for us, but it is very much dependent on the data that you have as an organisation.
Brilliant, thank you. Another question, have any of the panellists launched any disability networks? And then she's put with respect to LGBT people with disabilities and hidden disabilities. Tony's nodding, do you want to talk, Tony?
Yes, so I'm trying to think now, would it be 2 years ago? I supported Diageo to launch their first disability ERG, which centred around Europe, and I believe is now rolled out globally. And as a core part of that, there was a focus on how that group would connect with other ERGs. So, for example, their Rainbow Network. I mean, I guess, what do you want to know about setting it up? You know, there's a lot involved, but I think that, you know, Greg and Daniel and Jemma have talked about, and Julie as well, talked about the work that they've done to set up ERGs. There's loads of great guidance out there, and of course, you know, you can always get in touch as well if you want to have an offline conversation about setting up any ERGs in your organisation.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really, really grateful for everyone's comments today. I think, you know, we're getting to the top of the hour now, but so I just wanted to really kind of sum up from everybody. If you could give a quick kind of overview of what allyship means to you, and, you know, if you could just, you know, talk about how people can join certain networks. So I know that Dan, you're a co-founder of LGBT in FM, and Julie, LGBT in property. So Dan, how would people join the LGBT in FM network if they wanted to?
Yeah, there's no barriers to entry. So you can find us on Twitter, and you can find us on LinkedIn. Just look us up, reach out. We do a number of events. Yeah, absolutely no barriers to entry, and everybody's welcome.
Wonderful, thank you. And Julie, for the same in property?
Yep, same. So I can put our Twitter handle in the chat if that's helpful.
Please. That's
sort of where we do most of our comms, but there is a mailing list, so if anybody wants to be part of that and get sort of invites to our events, then they can get in touch with me and I can add you onto that.
Brilliant, thank you.
Oh, sorry, Nikki. I just wanted to just say, just to tie back to the LGBT community and allyship. The first one is that there are also groups for people of colour. So there is the queer, transgender and intersex people of colour. If anybody of colour doesn't feel as comfortable going to an LGBTQ plus event, obviously, as Dan was saying, it is open to all, but you may want to kind of, from a community and cultural perspective, you may want to obviously start there. And then I do just want to say, just off the back of obviously IWD and obviously it being History Month, I do want to just call for allyship also, not just for the murder of Sarah that happened obviously last week, but also for blessing Olusegun, who also was murdered at 21 on a beach, has not had the same coverage as what we've seen with regards to Sarah. I do want a call to action with that as well. And anybody that does want to sign up for the signatures for things to kind of be looked at and to be investigated, then I would, you know, really ask you to do that. Because as Dan said at the beginning of the conversation, we're all in it together, regardless of our gender or our race. It may affect those of a darker skin tone than those of a lighter, but we're all in it together. It all affects us in some way. So I just wanted to put that out there as well.
And I totally agree. And I just wanted to say there were also 2 sisters last year who were murdered. And unfortunately, the policemen took horrible pictures and were sharing it on Twitter. And again, they didn't get the same coverage. But at the end of the day, what's happened over the last week has been absolutely awful, you know, and that has got to stop. So, yeah.
Agreed. Thank you so much, everyone, for the amazing work that you're doing in your fields, and you know, really appreciate everything that you're doing. And thanks so much for being present on our webinar today. And there will be a recording. A lot of people are asking me in the chat. There is a recording. Everyone who's attended will get a follow-up email